Deadpool was a pretty sweet movie, filled with great fighting, a witty script and really shitty CGI. And despite featuring more of the same, some fans don't like Deadpool 2 all that much. People have been saying as far back as Iron Man 2 that comic book movie sequels are all the same, and it's just a bubble that'll burst. Well, I've been laughing at those yellow pants wearing dickheads for a long time because, hint, it's not a bubble. Marvel have been so successful that they've pretty much created a new genre, the Marvel genre. And it creates a raft of sequels and team-up movies which are popular and successful. But I get where those people are coming from. Comic book movies are pretty ubiquitous these days, and some people don't like that. Do you, Clarice? Well, if that's you, if you're the kind of guy who thinks that comic book team-up movies and sequels are about as appealing as an eclair filled with dog jizz, well then you're in for a treat because there is a comic book team-up movie sequel for you. Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 tells the story of how Wade Wilson tries to come to terms with the death of his girlfriend. But in trying to do this, he actually learns the value of family. Now, I won't go into the plot too much since I'm pretty sure you've already seen it. So how is this the perfect anti-team-up, anti-sequel, team-up sequel? Well, let's start with what people commonly complain about. Characters have no meaningful arcs and often disregard things that have happened in the first movie. They have terrible one-note villains who are either shallow or just some CGI mess. They repeat the same shit they did in the last movie, or it's way too different than the first movie. Holy shit, you guys really can't be pleased, can you? And the final complaint is that there's way too many fucking characters. Deadpool 2 either addresses, mocks, or subverts each and every one of these criticisms. A complaint which is not specific to Deadpool 2 but of many sequels is that it ignores or dismisses what happened in previous installments. Indiana Jones is the exact same character in every movie, and seems completely oblivious to what he did previously. At the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond gets married. Yay, character progress! But in the next fucking movie, she's dead! She didn't even make it to the fucking credits! It's very common for characters in sequels to not learn from the original movie. So what does Deadpool 2 do? Well, it makes him learn from the first movie. So he's a merc for hire in Deadpool 1, and it's true he has a pretty good moral compass for a bad motherfucker paid to fuck people up. But he's still a merc for hire. Hey, if you're good at something, never do it for free. Every job he ever takes is for selfish reasons. Even him saving Vanessa is driven by selfish factors. The opening sequence from Deadpool 2 sees him doing the same and hacking people up for money. Or is it? We'll come back to this in a minute. Deadpool 1 sets Wade as a loner, with no interest in being part of a team whose sole focus is his former girlfriend Vanessa. In Deadpool 2, he's a loner, focused on Vanessa and intent on being left alone. The most common complaint of Deadpool 2 is the death of Vanessa, before the credits even roll. Something which is continuously mocked in the James Bond style credits. Fans have got this all wrong. To start with, there are 3 ways to deal with Vanessa in this movie. And keep in mind that Deadpool 1 had him save her and live happily ever after. She is an extremely compelling reason for Wade to stop being Deadpool. So number 1, she doesn't die, but instead is included in some token scenes of Wade's downtime, which would most certainly be criticised as repeating what Deadpool 1 did. Method number 2, you could include her and change her character to be more involved with Deadpool's murdering so as to avoid her simply being a token character. And I'm pretty sure fans would moan that they totally changed their character if they did this. Method number 3, you can kill her character and have that be the reason for Wade to continue being Deadpool. This is actually the first of Deadpool 2's many subversions of common complaints. Women are often just devices for a romantic subplot and are disposable outside of that subplot. When she appears in Deadpool 2, the expectation is that she'll fill the same role as Deadpool 1, the romantic subplot. When she immediately dies, that's an instant mocking of that trope. This is then mocked further by the post-credit scene, but we're going to come back to this later. So remember when I said that Deadpool 2 opens with Wade hacking people up for money, thus proving that his character has not really progressed? Well, if you pay close attention, that you'll see that instead of hacking people up for money, there's some purpose to what he does now.
Love the shiny suit. Really brings out the sex trafficker in your eyes.
In what seems like a throwaway introduction, we can see that he's actually busting up a child sex slave ring, meaning that this line later,
"That kid was abused. You can tell, you can always tell,"
is not a joke at all, but 100% true, and gives him a solidly set up motivation to help this kid. Wade has actually got experience of freeing children who have been abused and oppressed. Which, when combined with the fact that he was being encouraged to give up the merc life in favour of family life by Vanessa, makes his character motivations far more compelling than the first movie. Wade learned from his experience in the first movie, and instead of slicing people up for money, he's now actually putting his skills and powers to a more selfless use. Even though he had kind of learned from the first movie, it's clear that he still hasn't learned completely, because Vanessa wants him to settle down, but he's still murking. It's his death dealing which ultimately causes her death, thereby giving him another moment of character growth, in which he learns that he should have settled down. There should never have been a Deadpool 2, because he should have lived a happy life with Vanessa and hung up the swords. In the post-credits scene, he goes back in time and saves her. It's literally mocking how sequels treat important characters from the original movie as disposable just so that we can have a sequel. For those fans who actually wanted Wade and Vanessa to end up together at the end of the movie, congrats, you got what you wish. You got to have your cake and eat it, since you got to go on a wild ride with Wade and a new adventure untethered by the events of the first movie, but at the same time ended up with circumstances exactly the same by the end of the movie. So really, if your beef is that Vanessa dies, well, you're wrong, because she doesn't. At the end of Deadpool 2, Wade swaps his Adventure Time watch for Cable's snazzy timepiece and goes back and uses his deadly cheese spreading skills to save Vanessa. I told you we'd come back to this. Her restoration is not just a physical reappearance, it's symbolic of the message Deadpool 2 is sending about all love interests in all movies. Wade is literally willing to erase everything, all the good things he'd achieved and friends he'd made, because Vanessa was more important to him than continuing being Deadpool. The problem with many sequels is poor villains, or even worse, the same villain. It's a problem which is common to superhero movies as well, with many of them featuring CGI armies or even full CGI villains with all the depth of a YouTube movie review. The villains are poorly motivated and bent on destroying shit because, well, reasons. What does Deadpool 2 do? Well, it creates a CGI monster which destroys shit because reasons. Just kidding. This guy isn't the villain. This guy isn't even the villain. In fact, the villain is this fat quirky kid with the adorable Kiwi accent. He couldn't possibly look or sound more comical or harmless. Look at him. If he were African, he'd be getting into the groove in a beautiful English mansion instead of throwing flaming buggers everywhere. If that isn't a subversion of the big bad supervillain archetype, then I don't know what is. In addition to that, his motivation for becoming a villain in the first place is that he wants to take revenge on the people who abused him while he was in a children's home. That's a perfectly valid motivation for a child with superpowers who has yet to learn to use them responsibly. It's also pretty reflective of what happens to people who are bullied. They often become the bully. The meat of the story in Deadpool 2 is essentially Wade trying to redeem himself by redeeming Russell by giving him what Vanessa and Colossus had tried to give Wade: family. The one thing both these characters were lacking. Russell isn't a crappy CGI villain whose goal is world domination for no real reason. He's a kid who was abused, who has realised that he has the power to turn the tables on the abusers. As far as character construction goes, he's a better developed, better motivated villain than even a really popular one like Loki. Here is the only one of my DP2 points, which I think is kind of debatable. I think Deadpool 2 retains the spirit of the first movie whilst also keeping it different enough so as not to repeat too much. This is the primary method of referencing an homage in another movie. If you watched my Easy A video, then you'll already know that. The first movie had this almost grindhouse look and feel, which went along with its revenge and rescue theme pretty well. A lot of people seem to really enjoy that, myself included. Deadpool 2, however, takes a far lighter tone in both its use of colour and its theme, the effect of positive support networks on damaged individuals. So it is definitely different in its approach. On the surface, it seems like it's only linked to the first as its use of pop culture references and the fact that it has a coke-addicted blind black lady in it. The strongest link, and some might say the actual heart of the first movie, Vanessa, is severed almost straight away. But Deadpool 2 also keeps the same tongue-in-cheek humour, the same overt violence, and the same desire to send a positive message. The message is different, but it still wants to send one. Deadpool 1 was centred around the romance between Vanessa and Wade, and how that finding a person whose crazy matches yours is far more fulfilling than finding the person who is the hottest or smartest or pursuing riches. Pretty wholesome message. Deadpool 2 does something very similar. You could say that the central theme of the movie is that even damaged people can be repaired, and all it takes is a bit of patience, belief, and a strong network of people willing to help. This is reflected in not just Russell's story, but Wade's and Cable's as well. Each of these characters can't overcome their individual tragedies alone, but together they can. So the movie is not different enough to be unrecognisable and not similar enough to feel like a retread. It's pretty much the perfect way to execute a sequel. Ask yourself this: did you really just want Deadpool 2 to be a carbon copy of 1? I think this in-movie joke was clearly a dig at the massive connected universes and team-up movies of Marvel and DC. And for those people who have grown to dislike the many team-ups that now currently exist, Deadpool 2 enjoys poking fun at them as well, in perhaps its funniest subversion. So all the way back from when trailers were released for the film, we get the idea that this is going to be an X-Force team-up movie. It's hyped up pretty brilliantly without ever really showing us what will actually happen. It cleverly uses our knowledge of comics and expectations of what we think we know about X-Force to lay an insanely funny gag on us. Each and every one of his teammates, with the exception of Domino, is dead on the very first mission in hilariously funny ways. I don't know about anyone else, but this felt to me like a tongue-in-cheek joke at the expense of team-up movies. Honestly, in addition to being surprising and ridiculously funny, it was really clever. It also mocked one of my pet hates about movie marketing: trailers that lie. The trailers all built up an X-Force team-up movie, only to then kill the entire team in one fell swoop. I guess maybe to some X-Force fans it was disappointing, but for me it was hilarious and demonstrated exactly what Deadpool is all about. In closing, if your criticism of Deadpool 2 is that it's not Deadpool 1, then I reject that criticism, because that is no criticism. If your problem is that Vanessa dies in Act 1, they bring her back as one of the last acts in the movie and gives Wade the happy ending that his character was desperately searching for, while also giving him the lesson that he needed to learn in order to then accept the happy ending he is given. So fuck you. And if that isn't good enough, Deadpool 2 mocks the very notion of sequels as pointless by giving us a sequel that literally reverses itself at the end, rendering the entire story pointless.
All these bitches are prima donnas. I stuff my face with chimichangas. Tacos and beers, I was keeping it loose. Hang on for a minute while I'm dropping a deuce. Deadpool. Sexy motherfucker. Deadpool. Deadpool. Nah, just Deadpool. Merc with the mouth. I can't die, 1 foot in the grave, but I'm still alive. Try to kill me, I'll just revive. Then I'll put another bullet right between your eyes.
You're still here. The video's over. Go home.